Another thing that we were talking about is how ineffective it is to actually collect all the information and all the data on that. Can you talk about that, and can you talk about what would be an effective way and what actions you took to also gather proper intelligence with proper threats? Can you give us a little breakdown of that?
I'll give you some examples too. But the point that I had always been advising, I've been left them with the rules of how to do this, was to do a focused attack on pulling out information that was related to or in a zone of suspicion around known targets. And also having other rules that might apply, like, for example, if you're looking for terrorists, you might want to look for people using satellite phones in the mountains of Afghanistan or in Pakistan, or if you're looking for dope dealers, you might look for similar things in satellite phones being used in the jungles of Colombia. For example, that could give you a good suspicion. Then you need to look at them to sort them out. Are they or are they not? And then you can make those resolutions. But that's a focused attack. That's not pulling in the 7 billion people in the world.
Yeah.
Right? So now you're reducing the workload down to a set of information that is highly likely to be relevant to the issues you're after. And it reduces the work area. Because if the way they do it, when you do a bulk acquisition, it's just like Google. You do a Google query, and you get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of returns. And that means you do it every day. Okay, so every day you get another 100,000 or another million returns.
Yeah.
So every day you're facing this new set of information to look through, and you could never get through it.
And it's impossible, and it defeats the purpose of national security because it's ineffective to have 7 billion, communications of everyone, and it totally destroys their justification for spying on everyone because it's to protect us. But they're doing it in an effective way. So if they're doing it in an effective way. You also showed me ways that you were doing it in a more effective way with your security company. Can you tell us what you uncovered and what channels you went through and what was the response with what you found independently?
Okay. Well, one of the examples, I was doing a subcontract for Customs and Border Protection at the time, and we were looking at some of their data and saying, gee, we need to be able to do take a different approach because they were looking at things in a statistical way. Well, you can't tell anything in statistics. I mean, statistics simply are statistics, Well, we imported 500 billion tons of rice last year. We imported 490 million tons of rice this year. Yeah. Well, what's the difference? What does it mean? That doesn't mean anything. Yeah. So that was not an effective way to do analysis. We were looking at Customs and Border Protection material, and we decided, well, we could figure out ways to be able to attack these problems without doing a great deal of research on our part, since we had a lot of technical background from analysis from NSA. So we went on the web and started doing Googling certain material, and we found certain ways of looking at data that would help CBP. In specifically, what we did was look at shared attributes by multiple names for companies, which would imply, somebody's putting out multiple company names with multiple advertisement for different things, but actually they're the same company, and there's one activity that's behind all of these names, and unless you pull together everything that they're all importing and exporting, you won't see what the real objective is. So it's like the case we found were IEDs, the companies that were importing and importing the parts for IEDs. That is, one company of the, say, 6 or so names, one company would order one part, another part, and so on, so you wouldn't see that they were building an IED unless you got the aggregate picture together. Yes. So that principle of just doing aggregating multiple names of companies just that map to one or more common attributes, like a phone number, a fax number, an address, or a post office box number, things like that you could map them to, can pull out sections of companies that need to be looked at for their activities to find out whether or not they were really legitimate or they were really doing something suspicious. Well, we did that with one set of 5,032 companies that were on this one website that was advertising all Iranian businesses in Dubai. So, and that's where we found 222 company names, individual names, that mapped down to 55 separate groups that were involved in some kind of activity that needed to be investigated.
Yeah.
One of these was the IEDs. We knew that, okay? So we found that, and we knew that, and we wanted to know what the others were doing. Like, for example, are they after nuclear-type materials to, like, those cyclotrons or the triggers or any kind of nuclear device type that would be helpful in them building bombs or things like that, or even nuclear reactors that could help enrich plutonium, things like that. But all those things had to be. You have to look at to see what they're asking for and importing and exporting. They were doing it from Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, not from the Iran. So you were doing business with, the
Dubai company,
UAE, not
there's no embargo
Iran.
there.
Yeah. So they were not. It wasn't a direct connection with the. It was like front companies for Iran.
It's like a big puzzle that you're putting together, and you can see the different companies all coming from the same source, doing business in another country, putting, buying different stuff, and when it all comes together, they're all connected anyway. They're all buying IEDs and also nuclear equipment. Very important national security information that you found out independently through your own security company.
We're using Google.
Just Google, not spying on everyone. Exactly. Now, you found this out independently with your security group. What happened? What did you do with this information?
Well, we passed it to the Customs and Border Protection, dealing with imports and exports. And we also sent it to Colonel Woody's office in the Pentagon. He was involved in IED prevention and IED activity, who were doing imports and exports and things like that with that. So we sent that to him as well because we knew he was involved. We also sent it up to the Canadians because they were getting people killed by IEDs too, and we thought they should know. So we sent it up there and said, here, and it was all done. It's all unclassified. It's off the web using Google. Yeah. So, and then we, as we were going along, the Bureau of Industrial Security out of Commerce published BIS, Bureau of Industrial Security alert, telling people that they can't do business with these companies because they were dealing with IEDs, or they were sending them into Iraq and Iran to kill U.S. citizens and others who were involved in the war. So, I mean, that went out, and then all of a sudden those company names disappeared from the web. So they took them off. But in the process, all they did was do a renaming. They renamed them, put them back on the web with different attributes, but we picked it up based on a crossover name with a partial phone number and a post office box. That carryover gave us the new names for all these companies. Wow. But then the BIS, again, produced another article updating a lot of material we added to it and gave through the Customs and Border Protection to BIS. And so they updated it. And after that, those Iranian companies saw that we were looking for the old business names again. So they put them back out on the web, but they didn't put them in the same place, you see. So we saw them say, well, okay, essentially what they were saying was, okay, if they're still looking for the old names, we'll put the old ones back out. They can watch them. We're not doing anything there. We're all doing it on the new names, so they won't miss us. Yeah. So, but that meant that was a way of doing port security, not just for IEDs, but for everything: dope smuggling, arms traffic, everything. Yeah. All kinds of activities that international crime is involved with, money laundering, all that kind of stuff. You can see that kind of. It won't get to everything, but it'll get a good chunk of it. Yeah. And the point is that would add to port security. So we made a proposal to CBP that we do this kind of thing over their entire database, which was roughly 40 million records per year for 10 years, so about 400 million records. To us, that was relatively nothing. Yeah. Okay, I mean, the scale we were talking from NSA, we were dealing with trillions of things. This is nothing. Okay, exactly. So we thought we could do that, and we made a proposal to do it within 6 months with 4 people. And instead of picking that approach, they gave a contract up for $1.2 billion to some other major company.
Of course. Yeah. I think the major story here is that you, William, totally individually just shamed the NSA and proved how what they were doing was not to protect Americans because it was insufficient. It didn't work. You and Google, just proved how you could match and actually reveal real important information that was hurting and actually killing Americans overseas. And you did that independently without spying on everyone. So if this spying is not for national security, what is it for?
It's primarily for law enforcement. The FBI and the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA. The DEA has set up a separate group called the Special Operations Division that includes CIA, NSA, FBI, DHS, and the IRS. And their function is to look at NSA data and use that data to target and arrest people using local and state police and the FBI and DEA. So using police forces go arrest people using this NSA data. But there are certain rules when they do that, and the way they've laid it out, and this has been published in the news, they cannot tell either the prosecuting or defending attorneys in the court process or the judge, nor can they put any evidence of NSA data being used in any sworn affidavit as submitted as a part of the court proceedings. So they have to keep it all secret and out of court. Wow. And that means, nor can they tell, by the way, any of this. They can share the targeting, but they can't give the data, the evidence from NSA, wow, to our foreign counterparts. That means all the people related to FBI and DEA around the world, like Interpol and all, Scotland Yard, and all the police forces in European countries and any other country that's cooperating with those two agencies. So that means that information can't be taken into court. So what they have to do now, and there's a separate set of rules for it, is do a parallel construction. That means they already know where the data is from the NSA material. So they issue a subpoena, and like they would normally do in a police investigation, trying to pursue leads, however they got the lead, right? And go get that information through subpoenas. Yeah. Even using MLAT, the mutual law enforcement agreements around the world, they can get information that way too, and then use that data and substitute it and say this is the foundation of the basis of the data that we use to arrest those people in court.
So they work backwards, pretty much.
Yes, but I called this a planned, programmed perjury policy administered and directed by the Department of Justice of the United States. And it's subverting our entire justice system. They're perjuring themselves in court. That's what's going on here. Yeah, it's perjury.
It's insane.
I mean, even in the latest case with the Amnesty International versus Clapper, the Solicitor General of the United States got in front of the Supreme Court and told them that if any NSA data was used in a court process, that the defendant would be told. Well, the defendants have never been told, and according to Senator Feinstein, that program has been used to convict hundreds of people every year. Wow. So that's the violation of the constitutional rights of everybody in the United States. That's just the United States that I know of.
Because right now, it even came out, the IRS, the DEA, the FBI, local police departments have access to every single thing you do, and it can remotely turn on any electronic device you have and watch everything you're doing.
That's right.
And then if there's a force that threatens their legitimacy or power, or let's say an individual, like someone like yourself, who shows how inefficient they are and how they're not really doing a good job at all, they'll use that power against you.
Yeah, and the point is you don't have to take my word for it. After all, they did not stop the Fort Hood shooter. They did not stop the marathon bomber in Boston. They did not stop the underwear bomber going to Detroit. They didn't stop the Times Square bomber. The only thing that happened to stop that was the malfunction of the equipment they had. Yep. They have effectively stopped no terrorist attack that was actively going. They're really good at getting people, soliciting people to attempt a crime, right? So they entrap them. They're good at entrapping people, but they're not good at stopping the real ones. Why? Because they can't handle all the information.
Yeah, they don't do it targetedly. They don't do it efficiently, like you're doing, even independently by yourself. Real legitimate threat, real legitimate, and then you don't also violate people's privacy.
Right.
And then.
Well, there's no reason to invade anybody's privacy. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to sort out from the systems like the phone numbering scheme for the world and the IPv4, IPv6, those kinds of systems for handling the internet transactions. it's really easy to separate and isolate things that are involved with foreign activity and track what the foreigners are doing.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. It's also easy to separate out U.S. to U.S. Information. That's easy to do also.
Yeah.
So that you can not take that data in, you automatically give everybody privacy.
So you were there also at the NSA around and before 9/11. Could of 9/11 been prevented?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there? Because they called it the summer of warnings. A lot of warnings, a lot of information was given about what was about to happen. Is there any information you could provide us to what could have prevented 9/11?
Well, I mean, we had planned to deploy our capabilities well before 9/11 in January of 2001. So, and that meant we would be able to see and get everything.
Wow.
So it wouldn't have made any difference. I mean, But in spite of that, even afterward, they ran. Tom Drake ran the program at NSA on their database a year or two afterwards, after 9/11, and found that they already had material that would contribute to stopping it even before that.
Wow.
So it was already from the existing capability. There was data there already to help them stop it.
Yeah. So the war on terror.
They couldn't get to it because, again, even at that time, they had too much information.
Yeah. And then they blamed it on not sharing information or not having enough information, which is a total lie. That was their official line and their official story. Meanwhile, there were so many different warnings, so many different countries, so many different memos, so many different things out there. And if they were just doing their job efficiently or effectively, so many different things would have changed. So I'm guessing the conclusion I'm coming from this interview, and let me know if I'm wrong, is that the war on terror is really a war of error. It's really a war on the American people than it is on anything else. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't call it a war. I'd call it a money-making process. Because there's an awful lot of money involved in this. And that's really what they were after, building an empire and having a bigger budget.
Yeah.
Instead of doing things effectively and efficiently, I basically looked at it and said what they're really effectively doing is trading the security of the people of the United States and everyone else in the world for money.
Wow. Now, William, you went through a huge ordeal. You were raided. They tried to persecute you. You've obviously been, vilified by everybody out there when you first came out. Edward Snowden came out and proved everyone wrong. How was it knowing that Edward Snowden proved everything you were saying right?
Well, I mean, to me, there was I saw no surprises in what he brought out with him. The scale of it was only increasing from when I was there, and I saw that increase starting when it spread, of course, from the telecoms to the internet service providers, actually, it's the internet upstream program that was started that I saw. The PRISM program was added afterward. The upstream program were the wiretaps on the fiber lines that, like in the AT&T facility in San Francisco. I had estimated in the United States there were like 22 points that they were tapping, and probably 32 points at least around the world, because 80% of the fiber lines go through the United States. So if you tap the United States, then you effectively tap 80% of the internet or 80% of the phone network. Okay, so fundamentally on the optical networks anyway, so I looked at that and I said, well, that was my estimate for what they were doing. And then when the Neris Insight devices came out, it was pretty clear they were taking and storing everything. Because at that point, an Insight device could do one whole fiber, 155 megabits a second, resessionize, repackage it into the emails or file transfers or whatever you were sending across the line. It could do that, and then it presented for storage by NSA.
Wow.
So that meant, it was a matter of racking and stacking those devices in all these different facilities around the telecoms, or the fiber line runners, which are generally the telecommunications. The telecommunications companies are the ones running the fibers. So if you put these facilities in their rooms, in their facilities, you can pick up everything going across the lines, phone calls as well as emails. And I think the program that showed, at least the slide I've seen that Snowden took out with him that was been published was the one called Fairview, That appears to me to be the one that they're using. I mean, a whole Faraday program is like 80 different sites inside the United States, and that's where they're doing both the internet and the phone collection. Now, according to the latest publications about the Mystic program and the Retro program, Mystic programs, they're saying that they have recorded, digitally recorded the phone calls of everyone for 30 days.
Wow.
So they have a 30-day window to say whether or not they want to listen to that phone call. Otherwise, it ages off, and they just keep the last 30 days online. But for the internet, as far as I can see, there's no reason to have that kind of thing recorded. They simply store it all. It's digital text, so that's a lot easier to store.
You have a very incredible story, a very long career. What you did is amazing and fascinating. To have the courage to put everything on the line just to do the right thing is really, really something admirable. And is there any way people could find out more about you? Is there any way people could get involved in this fight? And what do you recommend people do?
There's several things people can do. I mean, they can get with some of the freedom active organizations for freedom, those who are advocating repealing the Patriot Act and the FISA Amendments Act, because after all, that Amendments Act gave retroactive immunity to the telecoms for all the crimes they were committing. And that, in spite of everybody saying it's legal, that's why they did that, because they were being sued for the crimes, and so they had to remove liability from that. So that's why they passed that Amendment Act, giving them retroactive immunity. Otherwise, they would have been in court and basically bankrupt by the lawsuits, class actions lawsuits, where they were being accused of transferring, which they were doing, all their customer information of all the 300 million plus U.S. citizens to the NSA to do the graphing. Wow. And that was evidenced, of course, by the article, the FISA BRW 13/80 order issued to Verizon to transfer all of their data on domestically as well to the NSA. I mean, that was over 110 million customers for Verizon. All their records were passed over there. Wow. So was AT&T and all the other. As far as I can tell, all the other telecoms are participating too. Wow. And then later on, with the internet providers, I mean, that just gave them more documentation. The two ways that we communicate: one is using the public switch telephone network, which means the phones, and the other is the internet, basically looking at email and voice over IP and all kinds of internet conferencing calls and Skype and things like that. So that covers basically the communications of everybody, and as a part of that process, even the metadata gives you the relationships that you have in the world, in the country and around the world. Yeah. So it shows you all those people you're associating with. Well, that's a violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. You have the right to free association. Yep. This is not free association. It doesn't say free association as long as the government knows it. So that's a violation of the First Amendment. Yeah. Not counting the Fourth when they take the content and all.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Totally insane.
We just don't have a Constitution anymore.
Is there? We definitely don't, but I think there's a big awakening happening that is really good to see. There's still so much to do. This fight is still really big, but it's an honor and pleasure to have people like you speaking out and being on the side of good. Thank you so much for your time. It really means a lot to me.
Thanks. Only the chair and ranking members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees were briefed. That's 4 Congress members. Wow. And they were all sworn to secrecy. Like, for example, Rockefeller, when he was briefed, he said,
wow. As well as staff members of these people too. So, wow. So whatever staff was working for Obama when he was, running for Senate, back then, which